A racist judge, his robe black as the corruption in his soul, looks down at a young black woman in his courtroom and laughs. He calls her sweetheart, questions if she even passed the bar, and tells her to sit down before she embarrasses herself further. But that judge, Judge Victor Caldwell, just made the biggest mistake of his 28-year career. He wasn't laughing at an incompetent public defender fumbling through her first trial. He was laughing at Sophia Mark, a Department of Justice special agent who had been working undercover for 18 months, documenting every racist ruling, every discriminatory sentence, every corrupt conspiracy. And Sophia isn't just here to win a case. She's here to expose an entire criminal empire and end dozens of careers built on injustice. This is the story of how one man's arrogance and his fatal underestimation of a black woman led to the most devastating federal takedown in judicial history. Before we dive into this incredible story, do me a favor, smash that like button if you believe no judge should be above the law, and subscribe to this channel if you want more stories of everyday people taking down corrupt systems. Trust me, what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Now let's see how Sophia Mark became the most dangerous person Judge Caldwell ever underestimated. Department 7 of Lancaster County Superior Court was not a room. It was a hunting ground. And for 28 years, Judge Victor Caldwell had been its apex predator. The courtroom itself was a monument to institutional decay. The walls were paneled in cheap oak veneer, yellowed with age and stained by decades of broken promises. The carpet, once a deep judicial blue, had faded to a sickly gray-purple, worn threadbare in the paths where defendants had shuffled in chains toward their fates. The air hung thick with the smell of industrial cleaner, stale desperation, and the faint metallic tang of fear that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Above the bench, fluorescent lights flickered with irregular rhythm, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look guilty. A large seal of the state hung crooked behind Caldwell's chair, Lady Justice with her scales, though in this courtroom those scales had been rigged for nearly 3 decades. To Judge Caldwell, she wasn't blind. She was willfully ignorant, and she liked it that way. Caldwell, 65, was a man carved from silver-tongued charm and calculated cruelty. He had a full head of perfectly coiffed white hair that he touched up religiously every 3 weeks, a face that belonged on a campaign poster, and eyes the color of a winter lake, beautiful, cold, and hiding dangerous depths beneath a placid surface. In his mind, he was not a racist. He was a realist. He believed in order, in consequences, in a system that, by pure statistical coincidence, had sentenced black women to prison terms 63% longer than their white counterparts for identical crimes. He sat now in his elevated throne, his black robe a cloak of untouchable authority, reviewing the morning docket with the casual confidence of a man who had never lost because the game had always been fixed in his favor. His clerk, Miss Patterson, a mousy woman in her 50s, who had learned long ago that survival meant silence, stood at attention beside his bench. "What do we have this morning, Miss Patterson?" His voice was smooth as aged whiskey and just as intoxicating to those who had learned to survive by pleasing him. "First up, Your Honor," the clerk responded with practiced deference, "is The People versus Destiny Brooks. Case number LC 2023-4891. 1 count of possession with intent to distribute. Controlled substance marijuana, 3.1 grams. A small, satisfied smile played at the corners of his mouth. Another gift-wrapped conviction courtesy of Captain DeMarco's creative policing. We'll have this wrapped up before lunch. He shuffled his papers with the easy grace of a man who had performed this ritual thousands of times. Each shuffle a small dismissal of another human life about to be ground beneath his system. His eyes, those cold Winter Lake eyes, flicked to the defense table. It was occupied, barely, by a young woman who looked like she'd gotten lost on her way to a job interview at a mid-tier insurance company. Destiny Brooks was 22, but today she looked ancient with terror. She sat rigid in a chair too large for her thin frame, wearing a discount store blazer over a Walmart blouse, her hands gripping the edge of the table like she might float away if she let go. Behind her in the gallery, her 3-year-old daughter squirmed in the arms of Destiny's mother, both of them watching with the hollow eyes of people who had seen this story before and knew exactly how it ended. To Caldwell, Destiny wasn't a person. She was a statistic, a case number, a box to check on his path to another perfect conviction rate. She was one of them. The endless parade of black women who cycled through his courtroom, their lives ground to dust beneath the gears of his efficient justice machine. Next to Destiny sat an empty chair. The public defender's office had become a revolving door of burned-out idealists and cynical survivors. Most lasted 6 months before transferring, requesting reassignment, or simply quitting the law altogether. Nobody wanted Caldwell's courtroom. Nobody wanted to be humiliated daily while watching their clients get steamrolled. The prosecutor's table, in stark contrast, radiated predatory confidence. District Attorney Robert Hastings, 58, sat with his perfectly tailored suit and his perfectly rehearsed opening statement, already mentally spending his conviction bonus. His assistant had laid out exhibits with military precision. Evidence bag number 1, 3.1 grams of marijuana. Evidence bag number 2, digital scale. Evidence bag number 3, empty baggies. Everything needed for the theater of certain conviction. Caldwell glanced at the courtroom clock. 9:47. Where is defense counsel? His voice carried just enough irritation to signal his displeasure to everyone present. The bailiff, a thick-necked man named Morrison who had seen 30 years of Caldwell's reign, shrugged with practiced indifference. Not sure, Your Honor. Miss Mark was supposed to be here at 9:30. Caldwell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sophia Mark. He'd had the misfortune of dealing with her incompetence for the past 18 months. The woman couldn't win a case if the defendant was filmed saving orphans from a burning building. How she'd passed the bar remained one of life's great mysteries, right up there with how some people managed to dress themselves in the morning. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom groaned open on protesting hinges. Everyone turned. A young black woman stood silhouetted in the harsh hallway light, fumbling with an overstuffed messenger bag that was hemorrhaging papers from every zipper. She looked impossibly young, late 20s at most, with natural hair pulled into professional twists that somehow still managed to look slightly disheveled, as if she'd slept wrong and hadn't had time to fix it. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that was just a half size too large, making her look like she'd borrowed it from an older sister. The jacket hung slightly loose on her shoulders. One pant leg was bunched at the ankle where it had caught on her sensible but scuffed black flats. She carried that overstuffed bag on one shoulder while balancing a Starbucks cup in her other hand and trying to check her phone simultaneously, a juggling act destined for disaster. As she took her first step into the courtroom, she stumbled slightly on the threshold. Papers erupted from her bag like startled birds, floating down across the worn carpet. The Starbucks cup wobbled dangerously. She managed, barely, to save it, but in doing so dropped her phone, which clattered loudly in the courtroom's judgmental silence. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Excuse me, sorry." Her voice carried a nervous breathlessness that made several people in the gallery wince with second-hand embarrassment. She crouched down to gather her scattered papers, her movements hurried and clumsy, creating more chaos than order. Caldwell watched this performance with the expression of a man who had just been served cold soup at an expensive restaurant. His lip curled almost imperceptibly. "Miss Mark, I presume?" His voice dripped with condescension, each word carefully chosen to cut. The young woman looked up from her position on the floor, papers clutched haphazardly against her chest. Yes, Your Honor. I'm so sorry," the security line was. She trailed off, realizing how weak the excuse sounded even before it left her mouth. "The security line," Caldwell interrupted, his tone suggesting he'd heard this excuse 1,000 times and found it tedious every single time, "has been in the same place for 15 years. Perhaps you should consider arriving earlier. Some of us value this court's time." He let the silence hang, a small cruelty he'd perfected over decades. "Of course, Your Honor, you're absolutely right, I should have." Sophia was still gathering papers, her hands shaking slightly, her voice apologetic to the point of self-erasure. "Are you quite finished disrupting my courtroom?" Caldwell's smile was the smile of a cat who had spotted a particularly slow mouse. "Yes. Sorry, I just..." Sophia stood up, her papers in complete disarray, and hurried toward the defense table, walking too fast, her messenger bag bouncing awkwardly against her hip. The courtroom regulars, bailiffs, clerks, the court reporter, the handful of law students and retirees who attended trials as free entertainment, exchanged knowing glances. The bailiff suppressed a smirk. The court reporter didn't even bother to hide her eye roll. They had seen Sophia Mark before. They knew exactly how this would end. 18 months earlier, The conference room on the fourth floor of the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington, D.C. was all glass and steel, the kind of aggressive modernity that made important decisions feel inevitable. Sophia Mark stood at the head of the table, wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit perfectly, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from 3 years of undercover work and a Georgetown law degree that she'd earned while finishing in the top 5% of her class. Around the table sat 6 supervisors, 2 FBI liaisons, and the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, a woman named Catherine Morrison, who had personally requested this meeting after reviewing Sophia's preliminary report. The projector behind Sophia displayed a single slide with 3 words in bold: Operation Blind Justice. Lancaster County, California, Sophia began, her voice clear and measured. Population 400,000. Superior court system processing approximately 12,000 criminal cases annually. And for the past 28 years, Department 7 has been presided over by Judge Victor Caldwell. She clicked to the next slide. Statistical analysis of sentencing patterns over the past decade. The numbers appeared on screen, cold and damning. Black women defendants, sentences averaging 63% longer than white defendants for identical crimes. Conviction rate in Caldwell's courtroom, 97.4%. Appeals denied, 99.1%. Complaints filed with the State Judicial Oversight Commission, 217. Investigations opened, 0. Catherine Morrison leaned forward, her reading glasses catching the light. And why haven't previous complaints resulted in investigations? Her voice carried the weight of someone who already knew the answer but wanted it stated for the record. Sophia clicked to the next slide. A web of connections. Caldwell has deep political ties. His brother-in-law is the state attorney general. His former law partner is now a state Supreme Court justice. His campaign contributors include the governor, 3 senators, and the majority of the state legislature. He's not just protected, he's embedded. One of the FBI liaisons, a man named Torres, tapped his pen against his notepad. We have the statistics. Why do we need an undercover operation? Can't we just subpoena his case files? Interview defendants? Sophia shook her head. We've tried that approach in 4 similar cases over the past 6 years. Each time the targets lawyered up, claimed judicial immunity, and we couldn't prove intent. Statistics show a pattern, but they don't prove conspiracy. We need to document active, ongoing corruption. We need to catch him and his network in the act. So what are you proposing? Morrison's tone suggested she already knew and wanted Sophia to commit to it verbally. I propose going undercover as a public defender in Lancaster County. Sophia clicked to the next slide, a detailed operational plan. I join their PD office, handle cases in Caldwell's courtroom, and document everything. Not just his rulings, but the network. We know from complaints that this isn't just one corrupt judge. There's coordination with the DA's office, with local police, possibly with other judges. I can see it from the inside. For how long? Torres asked. As long as it takes. 12 months minimum, maybe 18, maybe longer. The slide changed to a timeline with phases. Phase 1, establish cover and build credibility. Phase 2, handle cases and document patterns. Phase 3, identify co-conspirators and gather evidence of active conspiracy. Phase 4, the reveal and arrests. One of the supervisors, an older man named Davidson, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. Agent Mark, I've read your file. You're one of our best. You've done gang infiltration. You've done white-collar crime. You've even done that pharmaceutical fraud case that brought down an entire company. But this? His voice softened. You'll have to lose cases. Innocent people will go to prison while you're building your case. Can you live with that? The room went quiet. Sophia looked at the slide showing Caldwell's face, a professional headshot from the county website, where he looked every inch, the distinguished jurist. For 1,200 victims? She turned back to face the table. Yes, I can live with it. For a while, but I'll need parameters. If I'm going to fail people, I need to know it won't be forever. Morrison nodded slowly. We'll set a maximum operational window of 24 months. If you haven't gathered enough evidence by then, we pull you out and try another approach. Agreed? Agreed. And you understand the psychological burden? Davidson pressed. You're going to watch people get convicted. You're going to sit in your car after court, and know that someone went to jail because you didn't fight hard enough. We'll provide support. But this kind of operation does damage. It changes you. Sophia met his eyes. I know, but if we don't do this, how many more women end up in prison for the next decade? The next 20 years? She gestured to the statistics on screen. Caldwell has sentenced approximately 300 black women annually to prison terms that are systematically, provably, discriminatorily longer than their white counterparts. That's 6,000 women over the next 2 decades. If I have to watch 50 people go to jail over 18 months to save 6,000 over 20 years? She paused. That's not a hard calculation. Morrison stood up, walked to the window overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue. Agent Mark, if we approve this operation, you will be completely alone. You can't tell your colleagues. You can't tell the defendants. You'll have to maintain perfect cover for potentially years. You'll have to act incompetent, take abuse, lose cases, and smile through it all. Her reflection in the window looked tired. I've authorized 4 undercover judicial investigations in my career. None of them lasted more than 8 months before we had to pull the operative out for psychological reasons. Are you absolutely certain? Sophia clicked to the final slide. It showed a photograph of a young black woman, maybe 19, being led out of Caldwell's courtroom in handcuffs, her face frozen in disbelief. Her name is Keisha Williams. Shoplifting charge, $50 of groceries from a supermarket, 3 strikes law. Caldwell sentenced her to 8 years. Her 3 children went into foster care. She'd taken the food because she'd lost her job, and food stamps hadn't come through. She looked at Morrison's reflection. I'm certain. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Morrison turned around. Then, Operation Blind Justice is approved. You have 24 months. She walked back to the table, picked up a folder, and slid it across to Sophia. Your new identity. Sophia Mark, recent graduate of a 3rd-tier law school in Nevada, barely passed the bar on her 3rd attempt, joining the Lancaster County Public Defender's office in 2 weeks. She paused. Welcome to the hardest assignment of your career. Sophia opened the folder and looked at her new life. The photograph showed her in an ill-fitting suit, hair slightly messy, expression uncertain. It was perfect. She'd spent 3 weeks with a performance coach learning how to appear incompetent, fumble with papers, stammer when nervous, make eye contact at the wrong moments, dress just slightly wrong. She'd practiced losing deliberately, throwing cases in ways that looked like simple incompetence rather than sabotage. The present-day courthouse security line had indeed been long, but Sophia had arrived at 8:45, giving herself 45 minutes to spare. She'd spent those 45 minutes in the women's bathroom on the 2nd floor, carefully disorganizing her papers, wrinkling her jacket just so, and practicing her nervous stammer in the mirror. The woman looking back at her barely resembled the confident DOJ agent who'd pitched Operation Blind Justice 18 months ago. That woman was buried deep, hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed incompetence. Now, as Sophia reached the defense table, she caught her bag strap on the chair arm, jerking herself backwards and nearly falling. She caught herself, laughed nervously, and finally managed to sit down next to her client. She leaned toward Destiny and whispered, loud enough for the nearby court reporter to hear, I'm so sorry I'm late. I have everything we need, I promise. Destiny looked at her new lawyer with the expression of a drowning woman who had just been thrown an anchor. You're Sophia Mark? Her voice was barely above a whisper, thick with the kind of resignation that came from watching hope die in real time. Yes, Sophia's enthusiasm was pitched just slightly wrong, too eager, too desperate to please. I'm so excited to represent you today. I've reviewed your case, and I really think we have a strong. She trailed off, realizing how hollow it sounded even to her own ears. Miss Mark, Caldwell's voice cracked across the courtroom like a whip. If you're quite done chatting with your client, the people of this state are ready to proceed. Unless you need more time to organize your... His pause was deliberate, cruel. Materials? The word materials was laced with such contempt that it might as well have been crayons or finger paintings. Sophia looked up at the judge, her eyes wide, and for just a fraction of a second, so brief that only someone watching very, very carefully might have noticed, something flickered behind her nervous expression. Something sharp, something calculating, something that looked almost like satisfaction. But then it was gone, replaced instantly by flustered incompetence. No, Your Honor, I'm ready. Thank you for your patience. She fumbled with her papers, dropping several more onto the floor. Caldwell's smile widened. Patience. As if he needed patience for this. The morning stretched before him, as predictable as every other morning for the past 28 years. Another overworked public defender. Another open and shut case. Another conviction to add to his perfect record. By lunch, Destiny Brooks would be on her way to a 5-year minimum sentence. Her daughter would be in the foster care system, and he would be having his usual chicken Caesar salad at the country club with D.A. Hastings, laughing about how they'd kept their production numbers up for another quarter. He had no idea that he was looking at Special Agent Sophia Mark of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. He had no idea that his courtroom had been under federal surveillance for 18 months. He had no idea that the fumbling, nervous woman before him had a Georgetown law degree, 3 years of undercover experience, and 127 hours of recorded audio documenting his pattern of systematic discrimination. He had no idea that she had been deliberately losing cases in his courtroom for a year and a half, watching women go to prison, gathering evidence, building an unbreakable federal case, all while playing the role of the world's most incompetent public defender. He had no idea that Sophia kept 47 photographs in her bag, one for each woman who had gone to prison while she built her case, and that she looked at those photographs every single night before going to sleep, memorizing their names and their sentences like a prayer or a penance. He had no idea that today, this case, this moment, would be the last trial he would ever preside over. Judge Victor Caldwell looked down at Sophia Mark and saw exactly what she wanted him to see. A young, disorganized, nervous black woman who was completely out of her depth. He laughed. Not out loud, but in his eyes. That cold, dismissive laugh that said, "You don't belong here, sweetheart." It was the laugh of a man who believed he was untouchable. It was the last laugh he would ever have. The trial began with the kind of theatrical efficiency that Caldwell had perfected over nearly 3 decades on the bench. He didn't wait for formalities or allow for the subtle dance of procedural courtesy that some judges afforded counsel. He simply looked at Sophia with an expression that managed to combine amusement, irritation, and profound condescension into a single raised eyebrow. "Miss Mark, so nice of you to join us. Did you remember to bring the right files today, or should we take an early recess while you go fetch them?" The courtroom chuckled, a practiced sound of collective subservience. The bailiff smirked. The court clerk suppressed a smile. Even a few members of the gallery, regular courthouse observers who attended trials for entertainment, made small noises of amusement. Only Destiny remained silent, her face frozen in an expression that sat somewhere between terror and resignation. Sophia played her role perfectly. She shuffled papers nervously, her hands visibly shaking as she pulled out several files and spread them across the defense table in apparent disarray. "Yes, Your Honor. I have everything I need." Her voice carried that careful tremor she'd practiced for weeks, the vocal equivalent of apologizing for breathing someone else's air. "Excellent." Caldwell's voice dripped with false encouragement. "Then perhaps we can actually proceed with the people's case. Mr. Hastings?" He gestured to the prosecutor's table with a flourish that made clear where his sympathies lay. District Attorney Robert Hastings rose with the kind of confidence that came from winning 94% of his cases. A conviction rate so statistically improbable that it could only be achieved through one of 2 methods: perfect evidence and flawless prosecution, or systematic corruption. In Lancaster County, it was the latter. Hastings was 58 years old and looked like Central Casting's idea of a career prosecutor. Salt and pepper hair slicked back, 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Destiny made in 3 months, and a voice trained to convey absolute moral certainty regardless of the facts. "Your Honor, members of the jury." He pivoted to face the jury box, his movements practiced and smooth. "This is a straightforward case about choices and consequences." He gestured toward Destiny without actually looking at her. "The defendant, Miss Brooks, is a single mother." He let that phrase hang in the air, his tone making single mother sound like career criminal. On the evening of March 15th of this year, she made a choice. She chose to sell illegal drugs. He paused for effect. She chose to do so in a school zone. Another pause. She chose to do so while in possession of drug paraphernalia and packaging materials clearly intended for distribution. Sophia watched Hastings perform, taking careful notes in handwriting that appeared scattered and disorganized but was actually coded documentation for the federal investigation. She developed a system over 18 months. Certain letter formations indicated lies. Specific underlining patterns flagged potential constitutional violations. And seemingly random margin notes were actually precise timestamps for audio correlation. The evidence will show that on March 15th at approximately 7:30 in the evening, Captain James DeMarco of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Department observed Miss Brooks conducting what appeared to be a drug transaction on Maple Street, approximately 200 feet from Riverside Elementary School. Hastings clicked a small remote, and an image appeared on the courtroom's ancient projector screen, a grainy photograph of Destiny standing next to her car. Based on his observations and his extensive experience in narcotics enforcement, Captain DeMarco obtained a search warrant for Miss Brooks's vehicle. Sophia made a small notation in her margin. Timeline. This would become important later, though no one in the courtroom except her knew it yet. That search, Hastings continued, revealed 3.1 grams of marijuana, a digital scale with drug residue, and 13 empty plastic baggies of the type commonly used to package drugs for individual sale. He paused, letting the evidence sink in. The defendant will claim these items were for personal use. He smiled thinly. But I ask you to use your common sense. Does someone who simply wants to smoke marijuana need a scale and 13 empty baggies? Or is that the toolkit of someone engaged in drug dealing? Destiny's mother, sitting in the gallery with the 3-year-old who had started to squirm, made a small noise that might have been a suppressed sob. Caldwell's gaze flicked toward her, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly. Silence in the gallery. His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable threat. Hastings concluded his opening with a final gesture toward the evidence table. The facts are simple, the evidence is clear. And at the end of this trial, I will ask you to return the only verdict supported by that evidence. Guilty as charged. He sat down with the satisfied air of a man who had already won. Caldwell turned to Sophia, his expression a masterclass in judicial condescension. Miss Mark, would you like to give an opening statement, or are you perhaps not ready? His tone made it clear which option he expected. Sophia stood up, and immediately everything about her body language screamed incompetence. She knocked her water glass with her elbow, sending water spreading across the defense table. Oh no, I'm so sorry. She grabbed papers to blot the water, creating more chaos. A bailiff hurried over with paper towels while Sophia stammered apologies. Caldwell closed his eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. Miss Mark, perhaps you should take a moment to compose yourself before addressing the jury. No, I'm fine, I'm ready. Sophia straightened up, clutching her now water-damaged notes. She walked toward the jury box, her gait uncertain, her papers threatening to slip from her grasp at any moment. Members of the jury, my name is Sophia Mark, and I represent Destiny Brooks, who is innocent of these charges. A reasonable enough start, but then Sophia's carefully constructed incompetence took over. She lost her place in her notes, squinted at them as if unable to read her own handwriting, and began citing case law in a way that was technically correct but presented so poorly that even the jurors looked confused. In the case of... She squinted at her notes again. Terry versus Ohio, which was decided in 1968. No, wait. I'm sorry. That's not the right case. She flipped through her papers frantically. I mean, in the case of... Her voice trailed off as she clearly couldn't find what she was looking for. Miss Mark, Caldwell's voice cut through her, fumbling like a blade. Did you even prepare for today? This is embarrassing. For you and the profession. I did prepare, Your Honor. Sophia's voice carried that perfect note of desperate pleading that made several jury members look at her with pity rather than respect. Perhaps you should simply tell the jury what your defense is, rather than attempting to cite cases you clearly haven't read. Caldwell's smile was cruel in its kindness. Yes, Your Honor. Sophia turned back to the jury, her face flushed. The defense is that Destiny is not guilty. She's a good mother who works 2 jobs, and the marijuana was. She paused, seeming to realize she was about to say something damaging. It wasn't hers. Someone else must have put it in her car. She sat down abruptly, as if suddenly aware that she'd done more harm than good. The courtroom was silent for a beat, the kind of silence that follows a spectacular failure. Then Caldwell spoke, his voice carrying a note of weary resignation. Very well, Mr. Hastings, call your first witness. But what Caldwell didn't see What no one in the courtroom saw, except for three seemingly random observers scattered throughout the gallery, was the tiny, satisfied smile that flickered across Sophia's face as she sat down. She had just created perfect appellate grounds with her Terry versus Ohio reference, established Destiny's good character in the jury's mind, despite the clumsy delivery. And most importantly, she had captured another 5 minutes of audio documenting Caldwell's bias and disdain. The recording device hidden in her apparently disorganized messenger bag was capturing everything, as it had for 18 months, building an archive of discrimination that would eventually bury Caldwell and his entire corrupt network. Captain James DeMarco took the stand with the bearing of a man who had testified in criminal trials 237 times over his 20-year career. He was 48 years old, built like someone who lifted weights religiously and wanted everyone to know it, with a buzz cut that had gone gray at the temples and given him an air of distinguished service that juries found reassuring. He wore his dress uniform, badges polished, ribbons aligned, every inch the professional law enforcement officer who would never lie under oath. He was, in fact, about to lie extensively under oath. He'd done it so many times that it no longer registered as lying at all, more like storytelling with a purpose, narrative crafting in service of justice, or at least in service of his arrest statistics and the quarterly bonuses that Captain's salary provided when conviction rates stayed high. D.A. Hastings stood and smiled at DeMarco with the warmth of old friends and co-conspirators, which they were. "Captain DeMarco, thank you for being here today. Can you tell the jury about your experience in narcotics enforcement?" DeMarco settled into his seat, turned slightly toward the jury box in the way he'd been trained, and spoke with practiced ease. "I've been with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Department for 20 years. For the last 12 years, I've commanded the Narcotics Enforcement Division. In that capacity, I've participated in over 600 drug-related arrests and investigations. And based on that experience," Hastings continued, "can you describe what you observed on the evening of March 15th of this year?" DeMarco nodded. "At approximately 7:15, I was conducting routine patrol on Maple Street when I observed a vehicle parked in front of 542 Maple Street." He gestured vaguely, as if the address mattered. "I observed the defendant, Miss Brooks, standing next to the driver's door. As I watched, a young male, approximately late teens or early 20s, approached her vehicle. They spoke briefly. She reached into her vehicle, retrieved what appeared to be a small package, and handed it to him. He handed her what appeared to be currency. The exchange took approximately 15 seconds. The male then left on foot. And what did you conclude from these observations?" "Based on my training and experience, it appeared to be a hand-to-hand drug transaction. The brief interaction, the exchange of a small package for currency, the location, all consistent with street-level drug sales." "What happened next?" "I approached Miss Brooks and identified myself as law enforcement. I asked her what she had just sold to the individual. She appeared nervous and stated she didn't know what I was talking about. Based on the transaction I had just observed, I had probable cause to believe drug activity was occurring. I detained her and called for backup." "And did you obtain a search warrant?" "Yes. I drove to Judge Morrison's residence. He was on call for warrants that evening, and presented a written affidavit describing what I had observed. Judge Morrison reviewed my affidavit and issued a warrant to search Miss Brooks's vehicle." "And what did that search reveal?" DeMarco pulled a small notepad from his pocket, the gesture making it seem like he was refreshing his memory from contemporaneous notes, when in fact, the notepad was blank, and he'd memorized these lies weeks ago. "The search revealed 3.1 grams of marijuana in a plastic baggie located in the center console. It also revealed a digital scale with residue later confirmed to be marijuana, and 13 empty plastic baggies commonly used for drug packaging. Additionally, we found $347 in small bills in various denominations." Hastings nodded with satisfaction. "And, in your expert opinion, are these items consistent with drug dealing or personal use?" "Dealing, absolutely. The scale, the empty baggies, the cash in small bills, these are the tools of someone engaged in sales, not personal consumption." "Thank you, Captain." Hastings returned to his seat. "Your witness, Miss Mark." Sophia stood up, and for a moment her fumbling seemed to increase rather than decrease. She walked toward the witness stand while reading from her notes, nearly colliding with the court reporter's desk. "Oh, sorry, excuse me." She recovered, approached Captain DeMarco, and began what appeared to be the most incompetent cross-examination in legal history. Captain DeMarco, you said you saw a transaction at 7:15? Her voice carried that uncertain lilt, as if she were asking a question she didn't know the answer to. That's correct. And that was on Maple Street? Yes. Is Maple Street a busy street? Fairly busy, yes. So there were other people around? Some, yes. Did any of these other people see the transaction? Objection. Hastings stood. Calls for speculation. Sustained. Caldwell didn't even look at Sophia. Oh, okay. Sophia fumbled with her notes, dropped several papers, bent to pick them up, and in the process knocked her pen off the defense table where it rolled across the floor. A juror in the front row actually closed her eyes, secondhand embarrassment radiating from her expression. Miss Mark, Caldwell's voice was sharp. Do you have any relevant questions for this witness, or shall we move on? Yes, Your Honor. I have questions. Sophia straightened up, clutching her retrieved pen. Captain DeMarco, you said you got a warrant? Yes. What time did you get the warrant? I obtained the warrant at approximately 3 o'clock that afternoon. Wait. Sophia looked genuinely confused now, which was perfect because she wasn't confused at all. She'd spent 4 hours the previous night cross-referencing DeMarco's testimony against warrant timestamps, traffic camera footage, and Judge Morrison's call logs. You got the warrant at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? That's correct. And you executed the warrant at 4 o'clock? Approximately, yes. But you just testified that you saw the drug transaction at 7:15 that evening. The courtroom went silent. DeMarco's face remained impassive, but something flickered behind his eyes. A micro-expression that lasted less than a second. Confusion. I meant 7:15 in the morning. But you said evening. Sophia's voice was still uncertain, apologetic, as if she were afraid she'd made a mistake rather than caught him in one. I misspoke. It was morning. Oh. Sophia looked down at her notes, appearing to accept this. And Judge Morrison signed the warrant at 3 in the afternoon? Yes. But the warrant application. She squinted at a document in her hand. This is the warrant application you filed, correct? She approached the witness stand and handed it to DeMarco. Marked as Defense Exhibit A. Objection. Hastings was on his feet. The defense didn't provide this exhibit in discovery. Your Honor, Sophia turned to Caldwell, still holding the document. This is a public record. I obtained it from the court clerk this morning. It's the warrant application that Captain DeMarco filed. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. I'll allow it for impeachment purposes only. Overruled. Sophia turned back to DeMarco. Captain, can you read the date and time stamp on that application? DeMarco looked down at the document, and for the first time in 600 arrests, his mask cracked. The timestamp reads. He paused. March 15th, 4:30 p.m. So, you witnessed a crime at 7:15 in the morning, obtained a warrant based on that observation at 3 in the afternoon, but the warrant application wasn't filed until 4:30, and it describes the crime you witnessed as occurring at 4:30 that same afternoon? There must be a clerical error. A clerical error that changes the time of the observed crime, the time the warrant was obtained, and creates a situation where you obtained a warrant based on a crime that, according to the warrant application, hadn't happened yet? Objection! Hastings was on his feet. Argumentative. Sustained. Caldwell's voice was sharp, but his face had gone slightly pale. Miss Mark, do you have a question? I'm sorry, Your Honor. Sophia retreated, her entire body language screaming incompetence, even as her mind calculated exactly what she'd just accomplished. I must have misread the document. She looked at her notes, appearing lost. I don't have any more questions. You don't have any more questions? Caldwell stared at her in disbelief. You just exposed a potential Fourth Amendment violation and you're done? I'm sorry, Your Honor, Sophia sat down, clutching her papers. I'm not very good at this. But she was very good at this. She'd just created grounds for suppression of all the evidence. She'd exposed DeMarco's lies. She'd caught Caldwell in a moment of too quick protection of his co-conspirator when he sustained Hastings' objection without even pausing to consider it. And most importantly, her hidden recording device had captured all of it, adding another 7 minutes to the comprehensive archive of corruption that would eventually destroy all of them. In the gallery, one of the federal agents, disguised as a random observer, made a small notation in a folded newspaper. evidence timeline contradiction documented. In DeMarco's personnel file back at the sheriff's department, there were 236 previous cases. By tomorrow morning, a team of federal prosecutors would begin reviewing every single one of them, looking for similar patterns, similar lies, similar impossible timelines. Captain James DeMarco's career had approximately 22 hours left. He just didn't know it yet. The recess came at 11:30, and Sophia retreated immediately to a small attorney conference room on the second floor of the courthouse. The room was barely larger than a closet, with fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects, a scarred wooden table, and two chairs that looked like they'd been stolen from a high school cafeteria sometime in the 80s. Sophia closed the door, locked it, and for the first time in 3 hours allowed her facade to crack. She sat down heavily in one of the chairs, set her messenger bag on the table, and unzipped the inner pocket where she kept them. 47 photographs, printed on photo paper, each one a face, a name, a sentence. She spread them across the scarred table surface like a card reader laying out a tragedy in suits and numbers. Keisha Williams, 8 years for shoplifting, $50 of groceries, 3 children in foster care. Patricia Johnson, 5 years for marijuana possession, 0.8 grams, first offense. Angela Davis, 10 years for assault after defending herself from an abusive partner who was never charged. Renee Mitchell, 7 years for welfare fraud after she failed to report $73 in babysitting income while trying to feed her family. Sophia touched each photograph as she had every day for 18 months, a ritual that had become something between meditation and penance. These women had stood at the defense table in Department 7. These women had faced Judge Victor Caldwell. These women had been represented by Sophia Mark, who fumbled and stammered and lost. These women had gone to prison while Sophia gathered evidence. She picked up Keisha Williams's photograph. The image showed a 27-year-old black woman with exhausted eyes and her expression that conveyed utter defeat. Sophia had represented her 11 months ago, in what had been only the 7th case of Operation Blind Justice. The charges should have been dismissed. Keisha had taken food she couldn't pay for because she'd been laid off from her job at a call center. Her unemployment had been delayed due to administrative error, and her food stamps hadn't been processed in time. She'd taken formula for her 6-month-old daughter, bread, peanut butter, $50.17 worth of groceries. But Caldwell had applied the 3 strikes law. Keisha had 2 prior convictions, both for similarly minor theft charges, both from periods when she'd been desperately poor and trying to survive. 3 strikes meant 8 years minimum. Sophia had argued, staying in character, fumbling her objections but still making the legal points that should have mattered. Caldwell had smiled and sentenced Keisha to 8 years anyway. The baby went to foster care. The other 2 children, ages 4 and 6, went to different foster homes because no one could take all 3. Sophia set the photograph down and picked up another. Patricia Johnson, arrested for possession of 0.8 grams of marijuana found during a traffic stop. Captain DeMarco had pulled her over for a supposed broken taillight that footage later proved was working fine. He'd claimed to smell marijuana and searched her car, finding less than a gram in her glove compartment. She'd been driving home from her job as a night shift nurse at the county hospital. The case should have been dismissed. The search was illegal. The amount was tiny. Patricia had no criminal record. But Caldwell had refused to suppress the evidence, accepted DeMarco's testimony without question, and sentenced Patricia to 5 years. She'd lost her nursing license. Her daughter had dropped out of college to try to support her younger siblings. Sophia had represented Patricia 9 months ago. She'd filed the motion to suppress. She'd cited the correct case law. She'd made the right arguments. But she'd done so while stammering and dropping her papers and appearing generally incompetent, and Caldwell had denied the motion with obvious pleasure. The rest of the photographs told similar stories. 47 women, 47 lives destroyed or damaged. 47 times Sophia Mark had stood at the defense table and deliberately, strategically, carefully lost. Her phone buzzed, the encrypted phone, not the regular one she carried for her Sophia Mark public defender identity. She pulled it from the hidden pocket in her bag and read the message from her supervisor, Davidson. Status check. Everything okay? Sophia typed back. Timeline discrepancy exposed in DeMarco testimony. Created suppression grounds. Caldwell protected him too quickly, getting good audio. Physical and mental status? She paused before answering. She was tired. She was carrying 47 photographs worth of guilt. She'd spent 18 months living a lie, enduring daily humiliation and mockery, watching women go to prison, all while knowing she could have saved them if she'd broken character for even a moment. Operational. She sent the text, then added, "Destiny is the last one. After today, we move." Confirmed. Green light for reveal protocol. FBI ready to execute warrants simultaneously. You sure you're ready for this? Sophia looked at the 47 photographs spread across the table. Am I ready? She'd been ready for 18 months. She'd been ready since the day she'd walked into DOJ headquarters with statistical proof of Caldwell's discrimination and proposed going undercover. She'd been ready every morning when she looked in the mirror and practiced appearing incompetent. She'd been ready every night when she looked at these 47 photographs and promised them that their suffering would mean something. Ready, she texted back. Let's bring them all home. There was a knock at the conference room door. Sophia quickly gathered the photographs, returned them to the inner pocket of her bag, and took a breath. When she opened the door, Destiny Brooks stood there, her expression somewhere between desperate hope and absolute despair. Can I talk to you? Destiny's voice was quiet. Of course. Sophia stepped aside, and Destiny entered the small room. They sat across from each other at the scarred table, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Destiny broke the silence. You're not what they say you are. It wasn't a question. Sophia's heart rate increased slightly, but her expression remained in character, uncertain and apologetic. I'm trying my best. I know I'm not very good at this, but I really do want to help you. No, Destiny shook her head. I've been watching you, the way you asked that question about the warrant timing. That wasn't incompetence. That was deliberate. You knew exactly what you were doing. She leaned forward. Who are you really? Sophia felt the weight of 18 months pressing down on her. She wanted desperately to tell this terrified young woman the truth, to say, I'm a federal agent. I've been undercover for 18 months. Everything is going to be okay. Your charges will be dismissed. You'll get your daughter back. And the people who put you here will go to prison for a very long time. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not until the trap was completely set. I'm your lawyer, Sophia said softly, and I know you're innocent. Tomorrow, I'm going to prove it. How? Destiny's voice cracked. They're going to take my daughter. The prosecutor told me if I don't take the plea deal, if I go to trial and lose, they'll recommend I lose custody permanently. 5 years isn't bad, he said. Better than 12. Better than never seeing her again. She wiped her eyes. So maybe I should just take it. No. The word came out harder than Sophia intended, and she saw Destiny look up in surprise. Don't take that deal. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Why should I? You've lost every case you've ever had. Everyone says you're the worst public defender in the county. Maybe I am. Sophia held Destiny's gaze. Or maybe I've been waiting for the right case. She paused. Will you trust me? One more day? Destiny looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for something. Whatever she saw there, it seemed to be enough. One more day. But if they take my daughter, if they send me to prison, I'm holding you responsible. That's fair. Sophia stood up. Go home. Hold your daughter. And tomorrow, be ready for everything to change. Destiny left, and Sophia was alone again with her photographs and her guilt and her determination. Through the grimy window of the conference room, she could see the Lancaster County Courthouse lawn where, in approximately 24 hours, Judge Victor Caldwell would be led out in handcuffs, where DA Robert Hastings would be arrested, where Captain James DeMarco would realize his career was over, and where 47 women would begin the legal process of getting their lives back. Just one more day. The afternoon session began at 1:30, and the temperature in Department 7 had shifted in a way that only Sophia and the 3 undercover federal agents scattered in the gallery could detect. Caldwell was no longer bored. He was unsettled. The timeline discrepancy that Sophia had exposed in DeMarco's testimony had introduced a variable into what should have been a simple, streamlined conviction. He didn't like variables. The prosecutor's next witness was a confidential informant, a young man named Marcus Green who claimed to have purchased drugs from Destiny on 3 separate occasions. He took the stand wearing ill-fitting khakis and a button-down shirt that looked borrowed, his affect nervous but rehearsed. Hastings walked him through his testimony with practiced ease. How many times had he bought from Destiny? 3. What had he purchased? Marijuana. Small amounts. What had she said? That she could get him more if he needed it. Everything perfectly scripted, perfectly calculated to support the narrative of Destiny as dealer rather than victim. When Hastings finished, Caldwell looked at Sophia with an expression that dared her to object. "Miss Mark, cross-examination?" Sophia stood up, and something was different. The fumbling was still there, the nervous energy, the scattered papers, but underneath it something had shifted. She approached the witness stand, and her first question came out clear and precise. "Mr. Green, you testified that you purchased marijuana from Miss Brooks 3 times. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And each time, where did these transactions occur?" "At her house." "And what dates were these purchases?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I don't remember the exact dates." "Approximately?" "February, and then maybe March. Twice in March." "So February and March of this year?" "Yes." "And during these transactions, did you see anyone else at Miss Brooks's residence?" "Sometimes her daughter was there." "Her 3-year-old daughter?" "I guess, yeah." "So Miss Brooks was selling drugs in front of her 3-year-old daughter?" "She wasn't right there in the room, but yeah, the kid was in the apartment." "Mr. Green, how much did you pay for these purchases?" "Objection." Hastings stood. "Relevance?" "Your Honor, I'm trying to establish the scope of the alleged dealing." Sophia's voice was still slightly uncertain, but her legal reasoning was sound. "I'll allow it." Caldwell's voice was tight, overruled. Hastings sat down slowly, and Sophia saw what she needed to see. He was surprised. The objection should have been sustained. That was the pattern. Any objection to defense questioning got sustained. Any objection to prosecution questioning got overruled. But Caldwell had just broken pattern, which meant he was off balance. "Mr. Green, how much did you pay?" Sophia repeated. $20 each time. "So a total of $60 over 2 months?" "Yeah." "And Miss Brooks is alleged to be a drug dealer based on $60 of sales over 2 months?" Objection. Argumentative. Hastings was on his feet again. Sustained. But Caldwell's response came a half-second too late, the delay noticeable. Withdrawn. Sophia turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Green, are you being paid to testify today?" "I'm getting my witness fee." "Beyond the standard witness fee, has anyone offered you anything in exchange for your testimony?" Objection. Calls for speculation. "Your Honor, I'm asking about his personal knowledge of any agreements he may have entered into." Sophia's voice was steady now, the stammering gone. "I'll allow it." Overruled. Hastings looked at Caldwell with an expression of profound confusion. What was happening? The script was being violated. "Mr. Green?" Sophia pressed. Marcus hesitated. "I have some charges pending." "What kind of charges?" "Possession." "Of marijuana?" "Yes." "And has anyone discussed those charges with you in connection with your testimony here today?" "The DA's office said they might be able to help with my case if I cooperated." "So in exchange for testifying against Miss Brooks, the DA's office is going to help with your pending drug charges?" "They said they'd consider it." No further questions. Sophia sat down, and this time there was no fumbling, no knocking over water glasses, no dropping papers. She sat with her hands folded on the table, her expression neutral, waiting. Caldwell looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. He could feel it. 2 decades of corrupting the justice system had given him an instinct for when his control was slipping, and right now, with this incompetent public defender suddenly asking competent questions and making strong legal points, control was definitely slipping. During the afternoon recess, Caldwell called Hastings into his chambers. The conversation was brief and tense, and neither man knew that Sophia had obtained a federal warrant 3 months ago to bug the judge's chambers, that every word they spoke was being recorded by devices hidden in the bookshelf and behind the portrait of some long-dead jurist. "What's happening to Mark?" Caldwell's voice was sharp. "I don't know." Hastings sounded defensive. "She's usually useless." "Well, she's not being useless today." She exposed the timeline problem with DeMarco. "She got Green to admit his testimony is bought and paid for. Get this wrapped up. Force the plea deal. I don't want any more surprises." "The defendant won't take the deal. She's insisting on going to trial." "Then make her take it. Talk to Mark. Tell her if this goes to the jury and they convict, I'll give her client 12 years and recommend termination of parental rights." Make it clear that 5 years is the best option she's going to get. What if Mark actually wins? It was a hypothetical Hastings had never had to consider before. She won't win. Caldwell's voice was cold. I'll direct the verdict if I have to, but it won't come to that. By tomorrow morning, Brooks will take the deal. 5 years, concurrent, done by lunch. We maintain our numbers. In the second-floor conference room, Sophia listened to the recording through her encrypted phone, her expression hard. She saved the audio file, added it to the comprehensive archive, and sent a 3-word text to Davidson. They just confessed. The response came back immediately. Tomorrow, execute. That evening, Sophia drove to a nondescript office building in a commercial district 15 miles outside Lancaster County. The building's directory listed it as headquarters for a regional insurance company. In reality, the entire third floor was a Department of Justice field office that had been operational for the past 18 months, existing solely to support Operation Blind Justice. She took the elevator to the third floor and used her keycard to access what looked like a suite of insurance offices but was actually a war room. The walls were covered with photographs, organizational charts, evidence boards, timelines. A large map of Lancaster County showed Department 7 and lines connecting to the DA's office, the Sheriff's Department, the County Clerk's office, and a dozen other nodes of corruption. 13 FBI agents were present, along with Davidson and 3 other DOJ supervisors. They fell silent as Sophia entered, and she saw something in their expressions that she hadn't seen in 18 months: respect. For 18 months, she'd been Sophia Mark, the incompetent public defender. Tonight, she was Special Agent Sophia Mark again, and tomorrow she would merge those two identities in the most public way possible. Status? Davidson asked. Sophia walked to the evidence board. They just committed conspiracy to obstruct justice on tape. Caldwell and Hastings, in chambers, discussing how to force a plea deal and threaten the defendant with loss of parental rights if she doesn't comply. It's all recorded. She pointed to the organizational chart. DeMarco's timeline contradiction creates probable cause to review all his previous arrests. Hastings's deal with the informant establishes pattern and practice. And Caldwell's pattern of sustaining prosecution objections and overruling defense objections is documented across 127 hours of audio from 48 separate cases. One of the FBI agents, a woman named Chen, spoke up. Warrants are ready. We execute simultaneously tomorrow at the moment of your reveal. Caldwell, Hastings, DeMarco, plus 8 others including 3 assistant DAs, 2 sheriff's captains, and 3 court clerks, all charged federally, all denied bail as flight risks. And the 47? Sophia asked quietly. Davidson walked to another board showing photographs. Sophia's 47 plus 80 more we've identified from case review. Emergency motions filed with federal court as soon as arrests are made. We're asking for immediate release pending review. Should have at least 127 people out of prison within 72 hours. Sophia nodded slowly. And Destiny? All charges dismissed with prejudice. No possibility of refiling. Sealed record. Plus, we're recommending her for the Victim Compensation Fund, along with everyone else. The briefing continued for 2 hours, covering every detail of the next day's operation. At 11 o'clock, Sophia left the field office and drove home to the small apartment she'd rented 18 months ago when she'd created the Sophia Mark identity. The apartment was sparse, deliberately so. No personal photographs, no memorabilia, nothing that would contradict her cover story of being a struggling public defender who'd barely passed the bar. She took out the 47 photographs one last time and spread them on her kitchen table. Tomorrow, she would add one more photograph to this collection. Destiny Brooks, represented number 48, the last woman who would go through Department 7's corrupt system before that system came crashing down. She looked at Keisha Williams's photograph. 8 years for $50 of groceries. By next week, Keisha would be free. By next month, she'd be reunited with her children. And by next year, she'd be one of the named plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit that would bankrupt Lancaster County's corrupt justice system and force comprehensive reform. Sophia touched each photograph and whispered the same thing she'd whispered every night for 18 months. I'm sorry I couldn't save you sooner, but I'm going to make it right. Tomorrow, Judge Victor Caldwell would have his last laugh, and then Sophia Mark would have the last word. The final day of trial began with an unusual crowd in Department 7. Caldwell noticed it immediately. his practiced eye scanning the gallery as he entered from his chambers. Normally, his courtroom drew maybe 15 spectators on a busy day. A few law students, some retirees with nothing better to do, occasionally a defendant's family members. Today, there were at least 40 people packed into the gallery. Most looked like ordinary citizens. Maybe word had somehow spread that this trial was interesting, but several faces were unfamiliar. Professional-looking people taking notes, a few with expensive cameras. Caldwell felt a prickle of unease but dismissed it. Public trials were public. If people wanted to watch justice being served, that was their right. He took his seat at the bench, arranged his papers, and looked out at the courtroom with the expression of a man who owned everything he surveyed, which, for 28 years, he had. We're here for the conclusion of People v. Brooks, case number LC 2023-4891. His voice carried its usual authority. Are the people ready with closing arguments? We are, Your Honor. Hastings stood, smoothing his tie with the practiced gesture of a man about to deliver a performance he'd given hundreds of times. And the defense? Caldwell looked at Sophia with an expression that mixed contempt with weary resignation. Are you prepared, Miss Mark? Sophia stood. For the first time in 18 months, there was no fumbling, no dropped papers, no nervous stammering. She stood with her shoulders back, her posture perfect, her gaze steady. I am, Your Honor. Something in her tone made Caldwell pause. He looked at her more closely, seeing what he hadn't allowed himself to see before. This woman was not incompetent. She was not uncertain. She was not the bumbling public defender he'd been mocking for 18 months. She was something else entirely, and that something else was looking at him with the calm, focused intensity of a hunter who had just cornered her prey. Then proceed. His voice was careful now, cautious. Hastings gave his closing argument first. It was polished, professional, hitting all the expected notes. The defendant was caught in a drug transaction. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury should do its duty and convict. He sat down with the confidence of a man who had won 94% of his cases and saw no reason why this would be any different. Then Sophia stood. She walked to the center of the courtroom, and everyone present would later describe this moment in the same way. It was like watching someone remove a mask. The fumbling public defender was gone, replaced by someone entirely different. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear, strong, and absolutely confident. Members of the jury, my name is Sophia Mark, and I represent Destiny Brooks, who is innocent of these charges. But more than that, she is a victim of the most systematic, deliberate corruption in this courthouse's history. Objection. Hastings was on his feet. Improper argument. Sophia turned to him, and her smile was sharp. Oh, I'm just getting started, Mr. Hastings. She turned back to the jury. You heard Captain DeMarco testify that he witnessed a crime at 7:15 in the morning, obtained a warrant at 3 in the afternoon, but the warrant application shows the crime occurred at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the application wasn't filed until after the alleged crime. That's not a clerical error. That's a lie. Captain DeMarco fabricated his probable cause. The search was illegal. Every piece of evidence you've seen should have been suppressed. She clicked a remote, and to everyone's surprise, an image appeared on the courtroom's projection screen, a traffic camera photo, time-stamped March 15th at 7:03 in the morning. This is Miss Brooks at 7:03 a.m. on the morning in question. She's at work, where she'd been since 11 p.m. the previous night, working her overnight shift as a nursing assistant at Lancaster County Hospital. She held up another document. This is her time card, showing her shift start and end times. Captain DeMarco testified he saw her conducting a drug deal at 7:15 a.m. He was lying. Objection. This is improper. We weren't provided with this evidence. Hastings looked at Caldwell desperately. But Caldwell said nothing. His face had gone pale. Sophia clicked to the next image. A still frame from hospital security footage. And this is Miss Brooks at 4:30 p.m. that same day, still at the hospital, still at work, because she worked a double shift. Captain DeMarco testified he saw her conducting a drug deal at 4:30. He was lying then too. She clicked again. More traffic camera footage. And this is Miss Brooks leaving the hospital at 7:45 p.m. and driving directly home. No drug transactions. No criminal activity. Just a single mother working 2 jobs to support her daughter. The courtroom was silent. Sophia clicked to the next image. A blown-up version of the warrant application. And here's where it gets really interesting. This warrant application, the one Captain DeMarco swore under oath was accurate, shows the search occurred at 4:01 p.m. But Miss Brooks's car was parked in the hospital employee lot at 4:01 p.m., as this security footage shows. She clicked again. So either Captain DeMarco has invented teleportation, or he's lying about when and where he searched her vehicle. "Your Honor," Hastings was nearly shouting now, "this is outrageous. None of this evidence was disclosed." "That's because the defense didn't have this evidence yesterday." Sophia's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "But I obtained it last night from sources I will explain shortly." She turned back to the jury. The marijuana found in Miss Brooks's car wasn't hers. It was planted. The scale wasn't hers. It was planted. The baggies weren't hers. They were planted, and I can prove it, because the serial number on that scale appears in Captain DeMarco's evidence locker records as equipment checked out for training purposes 2 weeks before Miss Brooks's arrest. She clicked again. A photograph of evidence locker records. He planted his own training equipment in her car to manufacture a case. "Miss Mark," Caldwell found his voice finally, "you will stop this immediately. You are in contempt of court." "Actually, Your Honor, I'm not." Sophia turned to face him directly. "And you're going to want to let me finish." She walked closer to the bench. "You see, Your Honor, I need to address a rather significant procedural issue." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a leather credentials case. She flipped it open, revealing a gold badge that caught the courtroom lights. "My name is Special Agent Sophia Mark, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. For the past 18 months, I have been working undercover in this courthouse as part of Operation Blind Justice, a federal investigation into systematic corruption, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their constitutional rights." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, people standing, cameras clicking. Caldwell's face went from pale to gray. Hastings stood frozen, his mouth open. And Destiny, sitting at the defense table, put her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Sophia's voice cut through the chaos. "This courtroom has been under federal audio surveillance for 18 months, pursuant to warrants issued by the Ninth Circuit Federal Court. Your chambers have been under surveillance. Your phone has been tapped. Every discriminatory ruling, every illegal coordination with the prosecution, every conspiracy to obstruct justice, we have it all documented." She turned to address the entire courtroom, her voice rising. "Over 18 months, this investigation documented 1,247 cases handled by Judge Caldwell. Statistical analysis proves systematic racial and gender discrimination in sentencing. Black women in this courtroom received sentences averaging 63% longer than white defendants for identical crimes." Throughout the gallery, federal agents began standing up, revealing themselves. 10, 15, 20 agents, all producing credentials. Hastings tried to move toward the door, but 2 agents blocked his path. "We have recorded evidence," Sophia continued, "of conspiracy between Judge Victor Caldwell, District Attorney Robert Hastings, and Captain James DeMarco to fabricate evidence, conduct illegal searches, and intimidate witnesses. We have 127 hours of courtroom audio documenting judicial bias, 43 recorded conversations between co-conspirators, cooperation agreements from 12 court employees, forensic analysis of altered documents, and testimony from 200 former defendants." She looked directly at Caldwell, who sat frozen on his bench. "Your Honor, you spent 28 years corrupting the justice system. Today, justice returns." 2 FBI agents approached the bench. "Judge Victor Caldwell, you are under arrest." One of them began reading Miranda rights while the other produced handcuffs. For a moment, Caldwell seemed unable to process what was happening. His mouth opened and closed. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. "This is impossible. I am a superior court judge. You can't." His voice trailed off as he realized that they could, and they were. "I can." Sophia's voice was quiet but carried through the entire courtroom. "And I did." Caldwell was handcuffed at his own bench, the click of the restraints echoing in the silent courtroom. In the gallery, cameras captured every moment. In the hallway outside, more agents arrested Hastings, reading him his rights as he stammered denials. At police headquarters across town, Captain DeMarco was arrested as he tried to clear out his desk. At various locations throughout Lancaster County, 8 other co-conspirators were arrested simultaneously, 3 assistant district attorneys, 2 sheriff's captains, 3 court clerks, all part of the corrupt network that had operated for nearly 3 decades. Back in Department 7, Sophia walked to the defense table where Destiny sat in shock. All charges against you are dismissed with prejudice. The record will be sealed. And on behalf of the Department of Justice, I apologize that you had to endure this. But your courage in refusing the plea deal, your willingness to trust me when I asked you to, that made this possible. Destiny stood up, and Sophia pulled her into a hug as the courtroom erupted in applause. The 47 women, Sophia whispered in Destiny's ear, they're next. By next week, they'll be free. As Caldwell was led out of his courtroom in handcuffs, the last thing he heard was Sophia's voice, calm and clear, addressing the assembled media. For anyone wondering how a superior court judge could be arrested in his own courtroom, the answer is simple. No one is above the law, not judges, not prosecutors, not police captains, no one. And when those entrusted with administering justice instead corrupt it, when they use their power to discriminate and oppress, the federal government will investigate, will gather evidence, and will bring them to justice. That's what happened here today. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 18 months of sacrifice. Justice delayed is justice denied. But justice delivered, even if it takes time, even if it requires patience and pain, and watching innocent people suffer while you build an unbreakable case. Justice delivered is still justice. And today, justice has been delivered. The fallout from Operation Blind Justice moved with the speed and inevitability of an avalanche. Within 6 hours of Caldwell's arrest, the story had gone national. Cable news channels ran continuous coverage, split-screen images of Caldwell being led from his courtroom in handcuffs on one side, Sophia's press conference on the other. The headlines competed for the most dramatic framing. Federal agent poses as incompetent lawyer for 18 months to expose corrupt judge. Undercover DOJ operation brings down entire courthouse. The most sophisticated judicial sting in American history. By that evening, the federal grand jury that had been impaneled in secret 3 months earlier returned sealed indictments that were now unsealed. Judge Victor Caldwell faced 47 federal counts, 18 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 12 counts of conspiracy to violate civil rights, 8 counts of obstruction of justice, 6 counts of racketeering under RICO statutes, and 3 counts of witness tampering. The charges carried a maximum sentence of 167 years. District Attorney Robert Hastings faced 34 federal counts, including conspiracy, withholding exculpatory evidence, and civil rights violations. The evidence against him included not just his coordination with Caldwell and DeMarco, but a pattern of systematically withholding evidence from defense attorneys in over 300 cases. His 94% conviction rate, which he'd touted in every election campaign for the past 12 years, was revealed as the product of systematic corruption. Law schools began preparing case studies on prosecutorial misconduct using Hastings as the primary example. Captain James DeMarco faced 52 federal counts, including fabricating evidence, conducting illegal searches, civil rights violations, and perjury. The review of his previous cases had already identified 117 arrests with similar patterns to Destiny's case: impossible timelines, planted evidence, falsified warrant applications. The sheriff's department placed him on administrative leave approximately 3 hours before that became irrelevant because he was in federal custody. He would eventually be convicted on all 52 counts and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. But the story that dominated coverage wasn't the arrests themselves. It was Sophia Mark. The Department of Justice held a formal press conference at 9 the next morning. Sophia stood at a podium in a conference room at DOJ headquarters in Washington, D.C., flanked by the Deputy Assistant Attorney General and the FBI Director. She wore her regular professional attire now, no more oversized suits and disheveled appearance. Her transformation from the bumbling public defender to the composed federal agent made for powerful visual storytelling, and every media outlet ran before and after images. "Agent Mark," the first question came from a reporter in the front row. "Can you describe what it was like to maintain your cover for 18 months? Sophia considered the question carefully. "It was the hardest assignment of my career. Not because the undercover work itself was difficult. I've done longer operations. It was hard because every day I had to watch people be convicted, watch them go to prison, knowing I could have prevented it if I'd broken character." She paused. There were 47 women who went to prison while I built this case. I carry that weight every day. Are you saying you let innocent people go to prison? No. I'm saying that in order to bring down a corrupt system that had imprisoned over 1,200 people with systematically discriminatory sentences, I had to gather irrefutable evidence of ongoing conspiracy. That meant documenting the pattern while it continued. If I'd intervened to save one person, I would have blown my cover, ended the investigation, and left the corrupt system in place. She looked directly at the camera. Those 47 women made a sacrifice they didn't choose to make. But because of that sacrifice, we're freeing 892 people and reforming an entire system. Another reporter. Some critics are saying you went too far, that no investigation justifies allowing innocent people to be imprisoned. I understand that criticism. Sophia's voice was steady. And if anyone wants to argue that we should have taken a different approach, I'm open to that conversation. But I'd ask them to explain what different approach would have documented 28 years of systematic corruption, identified a network of corrupt officials across multiple departments, and gathered enough evidence to guarantee federal convictions. Because we tried the traditional approaches in similar cases. We tried reviewing statistics and interviewing defendants, and issuing subpoenas. And judges claimed judicial immunity, prosecutors claimed prosecutorial immunity, and nothing changed. She leaned forward slightly. This worked. Imperfectly, at a cost, but it worked. And I'll stand by that. The questions continued for 90 minutes. Sophia answered each one with the same careful honesty, acknowledging the moral complexity while defending the necessity. The coverage was mixed. Some outlets praised her courage and dedication. Others questioned the ethics of the operation. But everyone agreed on one thing. Operation Blind Justice had achieved something unprecedented. In Lancaster County, the legal proceedings moved with remarkable speed. The federal district court judge, assigned to oversee the case, a woman named Sandra Reeves, who had a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, granted emergency motions across the board. Within 72 hours of Caldwell's arrest, 127 women were released from prison pending review of their cases. Keisha Williams walked out of California Women's Facility on the 4th day, was reunited with her 3 children on the 5th day, and gave an interview on the 7th day that went viral. They took 8 years of my life for $50 of groceries, Keisha said, sitting on her mother's couch with her children around her. 8 years. My baby doesn't even remember me. But Agent Mark, she made it right. She carried my picture for 18 months. She told me that when she came to see me in prison last week. She said she looked at my picture every day and promised she'd bring me home. And she did. The interview circulated widely, and suddenly Sophia wasn't just a federal agent who'd done her job. She was a hero who'd kept a promise to the forgotten and the oppressed. The case reviews proceeded rapidly. Judge Reeves appointed a special master to review all 1,247 cases from Caldwell's courtroom over the past 10 years. The special master had a team of 20 lawyers working around the clock. Within 6 months, 892 cases had been overturned, or sentences had been reduced. The remaining cases were either legitimate convictions where no misconduct was found, or cases still under review. The Victim Compensation Fund was established with $47 million in federal funds, later supplemented by a class action settlement against Lancaster County for $180 million. Every person wrongfully convicted in Caldwell's courtroom received compensation, with amounts varying based on time served and documented harm. Destiny Brooks received $2.8 million. She used half of it to buy a house and establish a college fund for her daughter. She used the other half to found the 47 Foundation, named for the women who'd gone to prison during Sophia's investigation. The foundation provided legal services to wrongfully convicted individuals across the country, funded by Destiny's settlement and subsequent donations that poured in from across the nation. Within a year, Destiny had become a national spokesperson for criminal justice reform. She testified before Congress. She spoke at law schools. She wrote op-eds for major newspapers. And every speech began the same way. My name is Destiny Brooks. I am number 48. The 47 who came before me, who suffered while Agent Mark built her case, they are why I do this work. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten. As for Judge Victor Caldwell, his trial was brief. Faced with 127 hours of recorded audio documenting his bias, 43 recorded conversations proving conspiracy, cooperation agreements from 12 former employees detailing the corrupt system, and testimony from 200 former defendants. His attorneys advised him to plead guilty. He refused. He insisted on his innocence. He claimed judicial immunity. He argued he was being persecuted for following the law. The jury convicted him on all 47 counts after deliberating for less than 4 hours. Judge Reeves sentenced him to 32 years in federal prison, effectively life for a 65-year-old man. His judicial pension was seized. His name was removed from the courthouse wing that had been dedicated to him after his 20th year on the bench. The state bar disbarred him. He was erased from judicial history, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the corruption of power. On the day of his sentencing, as he was led from the courtroom one final time, a reporter shouted a question. "Judge Caldwell, do you have any regrets?" He stopped, turned, and for a moment his mask cracked. "I regret underestimating her." His voice was hoarse. That's all. 6 months after Caldwell's arrest, Sophia Mark stood on a stage at the Department of Justice headquarters, receiving the DOJ Medal of Valor, the highest award the department could give. The Attorney General himself presented it, praising her courage, her sacrifice, and her unwavering commitment to justice. The ceremony was covered by every major news outlet. Sophia's mother sat in the front row, crying. But that night, in her apartment, Sophia sat on her couch and felt nothing. The medal sat on her coffee table, a piece of metal attached to a ribbon. It was supposed to mean something. It was supposed to feel like validation, like closure, like proof that the 18 months had been worth it. Instead, she felt hollowed out. She'd started seeing a therapist in the second week after the operation concluded. Dr. Patricia Cheng, a specialist in post-traumatic stress and undercover operatives. Sophia went twice a week, sitting in a quiet office and talking about the 47 photographs she still carried, about the weight of watching women go to prison, about the cost of living a lie for 18 months. "You're experiencing a form of moral injury," Dr. Cheng had explained in their third session. "You did something that violated your deeply held values, your belief in protecting innocent people, even though you did it for a greater good. That creates a wound that doesn't heal easily." Sophia had nodded but said nothing. What was there to say? 892 people were free because of what she'd done. That should feel like victory. Instead, it felt like she'd traded 47 people for 892, and the math worked, but the weight remained. The nightmares started in the third week. She dreamed of standing in front of Keisha Williams, trying to explain why she'd had to let her go to prison. In the dreams, Keisha's children stood behind her, silent and accusing. She dreamed of Destiny on the stand, asking, "Who are you really?" and Sophia not having an answer. She dreamed of Caldwell laughing, the sound echoing in an empty courtroom, and when she tried to speak, to say, "I'm Special Agent Sophia Mark," no sound came out. Dr. Cheng had been blunt in their fifth session. "You need to forgive yourself, not for doing the operation, but for being human, for carrying the weight of decisions that had no perfect option. You couldn't save everyone. You chose systemic change over individual salvation. That was the right choice, but it cost you something, and you need to grieve that cost." 2 years after Operation Blind Justice concluded, Sophia stood in a very different office. She'd been promoted to director of the newly created Judicial Accountability Task Force, a permanent DOJ division dedicated to investigating and prosecuting corrupt judicial systems across America. Her office at headquarters was large, professional, with windows overlooking Constitution Avenue. On one wall hung a map of the United States, with 17 red pins, each pin representing an active undercover operation modeled on Operation Blind Justice. On another wall hung 48 photographs, 47 women who'd gone to prison during her investigation, plus one photo of Destiny Brooks. Below them, in smaller frames, were photos of the 892 people who'd been freed. Sophia looked at them every day. Today, she was briefing 12 new agents who had volunteered for undercover judicial investigations. They sat around her conference table, young and idealistic and probably unaware of what they were signing up for. Sophia had been in their position once, 2 years and a lifetime ago. She stood at the head of the table and began. "What you're about to do is the hardest assignment in federal law enforcement. You'll have to watch guilty verdicts you could prevent. You'll have to lose cases deliberately. You'll endure mockery and discrimination. You'll question whether the cost is worth it." She walked to the wall of photographs. These women went to prison while I built my case against Judge Caldwell. I carry that weight every day. But because of their sacrifice, not by choice but by necessity, we freed 892 people and reformed an entire system. She turned back to the agents. Some injustice today for systemic justice tomorrow, but never, never forget the human cost. If you can't carry that weight, walk out now. No shame. This work isn't for everyone. No one left. Sophia nodded, seeing herself reflected in their determined faces. Then let's bring down every corrupt courtroom in America, one undercover operation at a time. The briefing lasted 4 hours. Sophia walked them through every detail of Operation Blind Justice, holding nothing back. The strategies that worked, the mistakes she'd made, the psychological toll, the moral complexity. When they had questions, she answered honestly. When they expressed doubts, she acknowledged them. And when they asked if it was worth it, she told them the truth. Ask me when you're standing in a courtroom watching someone you could have saved go to prison. Ask me when you're alone at night looking at photographs of people suffering because you maintained your cover. Ask me when it's over and you've freed hundreds of people but you still have nightmares about the ones who waited. She paused. And I'll tell you the same thing I tell myself every night when I look at those photographs. It was worth it. Not because it didn't cost me anything, but because the cost, however high, was less than the cost of doing nothing. That evening, Sophia sat in her office alone, updating files on the 17 active investigations. One was in Chicago, where an undercover agent had been in place for 9 months, documenting a corrupt judge with a pattern of bias against Latino defendants. Another was in Atlanta, 6 months in, building a case against a prosecutor who systematically overcharged black defendants. A third was in Phoenix, just beginning, targeting a judge who'd been on the bench for 33 years and had a conviction rate that defied statistical probability. Her phone buzzed. A text from Destiny. "Come to the gala tonight? We're honoring the 47. You should be there." Sophia hesitated, then typed back, "I'll try. Work is busy." The response was immediate. "You're avoiding us. We don't blame you. We're grateful. Come, please." Sophia set down her phone and looked at a photograph on her desk. It showed all 48 women at the first reunion of Operation Blind Justice survivors, held 1 year after Caldwell's arrest. They'd gathered at Destiny's house, a celebration and a memorial. Sophia had attended, had hugged each woman, had listened to them tell her, "Thank you, and you saved me, and I'm free because of you." But she'd also heard the spaces between their words. The 8 years Keisha had lost with her children. The jobs Patricia could never get back. The marriages that had ended. The years stolen that no compensation could truly return. They were grateful. They were free. But they'd paid a price for justice that they'd never chosen to pay. She picked up her phone and looked at a new photograph that had been sent to her office yesterday. A young Latino man named Carlos Rodriguez, convicted in a Chicago courtroom of drug possession, sentenced to 8 years by the corrupt judge her agent was currently investigating. Carlos would be in prison for probably another 6 months while the investigation concluded. He was one more person paying a price, while justice slowly, methodically, built its case. Sophia opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside were 47 photographs, the originals she'd carried for 18 months. She'd had them professionally mounted and framed after the operation concluded. They hung in her office, but these originals stayed in her desk, a reminder of what justice sometimes cost. She added Carlos Rodriguez's photograph to the collection, number 48. She looked at his face, memorized his name, and made the same promise she'd made to Keisha and Patricia and Angela and all the others. "I will bring you home. It will take time. You will suffer while I build an unbreakable case. But I promise you, when I'm done, you will be free, and the people who put you here will face justice." The gala was at 8. Sophia looked at the clock. 7:15. She could make it if she left now. She put Carlos's photograph back in the drawer, closed it, and stood up. She put on her jacket, checked her reflection in the window, and saw both versions of herself looking back. Special Agent Sophia Mark, Director of Judicial Accountability, and Sophia Mark, the woman who carried 48 photographs and counting. She left her office, rode the elevator down, and walked out into the evening air. Constitution Avenue stretched before her, the monuments lit up against the darkening sky. Somewhere in Chicago, Carlos Rodriguez sat in a prison cell. Somewhere in Atlanta, another innocent person waited. Somewhere in Phoenix, someone else was about to be convicted by a corrupt judge. And tomorrow, Sophia would be back in her office, coordinating investigations, reviewing evidence, preparing for the day when those corrupt systems would be exposed and dismantled, because that was the work. Not perfect, not painless, but necessary. Justice delayed is justice denied. But justice delivered, even at great cost, even after great pain, justice delivered is still justice. And Sophia Mark, who had learned to live with the weight of 48 photographs, who had learned that doing the right thing doesn't always feel right, who had learned that systemic change requires individual sacrifice, would keep delivering justice. One corrupt courtroom at a time, one photograph at a time, one promise kept at a time. The price of justice was high, but the cost of injustice, unchallenged and unchecked, was higher still. She'd chosen to pay the first price so that others wouldn't have to pay the second. And she'd keep making that choice, carrying that weight, adding to her collection of photographs, until every corrupt judge in America knew that no one, absolutely no one, was above the law. The gala was for the 47, but Sophia was already thinking about numbers 48, 49, and 50, because the work wasn't done. It would never be done. There would always be another corrupt courtroom, always another person who needed someone to fight for them, always another photograph to add to her wall. Sophia got in her car and drove toward Destiny's house, toward the celebration of freedom and the memorial for the cost of that freedom. She carried the weight of justice on her shoulders, and she'd keep carrying it because someone had to, and because the weight of doing nothing would have been unbearable. Is less than #0. 5 is greater than. This story proves that even the most powerful can fall when someone has the courage to gather evidence, the patience to build an unbreakable case, and the strength to endure humiliation for a greater purpose. Sophia Mark pretended to be powerless while becoming the most dangerous threat to corruption. She carried the weight of 47 women's suffering to save 892 others. Real justice isn't instant. It's strategic, methodical, and sometimes heartbreaking. But it's possible. Is less than #0. 5 is greater than. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone fighting their own battle against injustice, someone who feels powerless in a corrupt system, someone who needs to know that patience and strategy can defeat even the most entrenched corruption. Hit that share button right now. If you believe corrupt systems must be exposed no matter how long it takes, no matter what it costs, then you understand what justice really demands. It demands everything. And sometimes, when the cause is right and the evidence is overwhelming and the stakes are high enough, everything is exactly what justice deserves. Is less than #0. 5 is greater than. And let me know in the comments, could you have done what Sophia did? Could you have watched 47 people go to prison to save 892 others? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment.